but it's about getting it set up for scale, because when one does reach scale, every basis point is super, super meaningful. If one is going out and choosing to, raise money or not raise money, but having not just a vision, but bringing that vision forward, you get a lot greater credit if you're actually doing it.
We're coming out of Startup Grind Omaha, but we've cross-promoted this to quite a few other chapters. So welcome to everyone from the other chapters that are tuning in either live or after the fact. In this live chat, we have Joe Keeley, co-founder of JustiFi, with us. So thanks for joining us, Joe. I'm going to give you a second here to kind of run through what JustiFi is. We'll get into some of your background, because I think your story is interesting, of like how that applies into what you're doing now. And Startup Grind's all about hearing those stories, especially from founders who have already kind of had a go at that. So let's start with allowing you to just introduce yourself, say hello to the Startup Grind crowd here, and tell us a little bit about JustiFi at a high level.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me today. Good to chat. It's heat of the summer, so we'll hope it's a poolside chat rather than fireside, perhaps. But delightful to be here. JustiFi, my current company, and I'm happy to dig into some of the history, is it's JustiFi Technologies. We're an embedded payment and fintech orchestration company. So what does that mean? We essentially help platforms. We've all heard around, embedded payments or embedded fintech and how that increases the value of a company, 5x, and it's all very exciting and sexy to think about. But how does that happen? And with whom does that happen? We effectively make that, easier, and in a partnership approach with our technology and our team for platforms to actually activate and win with the embedded payments and embedded financial services game. So.
Great. Yeah, I think it's interesting because our last Fireside Chat here in Omaha, we had Taylor Monks. They pivoted to be kind of an embedded finance company after trying to do some like blockchain stuff. And now they're going to start offering their service for free to an industry that's traditionally pretty high fee, because they're able to leverage the kind of embedded finance revenue streams. So it'll be interesting to hear from you a little bit more about exactly what that means for maybe founders that are still trying to wrap their head around what that opportunity is. But first, let's go back and just hear a little bit about how you got here. I know you had another company, and as I understand it, that was a pretty big part of the revenue for that company. So if you want to tell us kind of just the story of your previous company and what happened there.
Sure, be happy to. Well, I'm talking to you today from tropical St. Paul, Minnesota, and it isn't always that the case in the winter. But when I was in university, I went to the University of St. Thomas. I went to the entrepreneurship program there, and I answered an ad to get a summer job, as folks often do. But it was one that was sort of unique to our region, and it said, "Looking for a hockey player to watch our two boys." And so essentially a nanny, or a manny, as we like to call it. So I answered this ad, and I ended up getting a summer job, being what eventually our company called being a role model, as a summer nanny. And that for two boys that were 7 and 9. And they said, I showed up and I met the boys, and they were just delightful, boys that also fought and that sort of thing. So I became sort of chef, chauffeur, referee, and coach for the summer. It was a great summer job, but what I saw is a market opportunity that every parent, and I know this now as a parent myself, is looking for, different childcare arrangements. It's challenging. So ultimately, I took that experience and started basically a headhunting company while in college. And the great thing about having a business while in college is that the bar is really low. You can there's and even more today. There's just a lot of programs, scholarships, awards, and I was fortunate to progress in creating this business and place a number of my friends with families and have success in that, and that I was fortunate to win an award that I has actually gone on to be quite prestigious and is sponsored by Entrepreneurs Organization, called the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. So I was the global winner in 2003. And I was quite humbled by that, because the company is called College Nanny Sitters and Tutors. And it does exactly what it says. We place, college students and recent graduates to be nannies, sitters, and tutors for families. And the purpose of the company is to build stronger families. And I asked one of the judges, like, well, I'm sorry, like, I was quite humbled by the other finalists. Why did I win? And I mean, this person has so much more revenue than I do, or at least I felt like they did. And she said, "This isn't a revenue contest. This is a business plan and a business competition. And every one of us judges has children, and you are addressing a very real global need in a very unique way." And that award, that the money that came, that seeded some of that business, the seed money, did exactly what it was supposed to do, which was guilt me into continuing. And ultimately, then over 15 years, the headhunting business turned into a staffing business, turned into a national franchise business. We built a vertical platform and a booking system, sort of an Uber-like app, and we employed 10,000 people, and really did make an impact with children and families and young people to be role models. Ultimately sold that company to Bright Horizons Family Solutions, a public company out of Boston that has some similar shared values. Moved on, but stayed close with the family that I originally was their hockey playing nanny, and it was a great experience, which of course made me uniquely unqualified to run a fintech company today. But we can get into that story too.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on one thing though there that you mentioned that I think is interesting, especially for founders that might be earlier on in their journey. And it was kind of the point that judge or the judges made about solving a problem. I think people get very obsessed early on with revenue and which you have to do, especially if you're trying to play the VC game or whatever. But there's definitely a point very early on where really the focus seems like it should all be really on what's the problem that you're solving, and is this a unique problem? Just wondering what your thoughts, if you have any kind of thoughts on that now that you've been in business for a while.
Yeah, it's about solving a core problem and what makes one unique, and having one thing, I think, is not enough. I think, what are the three things that together are the three uniques of a company? And it could be how you do it, it could be what you do it, all those sort of things. But I mean, starting with, as Simon Sinek says, starting with why. Why do you exist? For us, it was about building stronger families. And so many people could get around that why. And then what we did was solve a real problem that exists and has existed since, we started having children, which is, having people care for your loved ones. And this exists in the senior care as well, when the primary caregiver is unavailable. And then how we did it, focusing on, and continuing to address how we can be better and better at doing that. We inserted technology, et cetera. That is core to start. And then matching that with the right business model. So oftentimes I think that, there's also a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, and perhaps intentionally, but I think it's unintentionally, the broader business community puts on, giving the impression that successful entrepreneurs, successful businesses have it figured out from the beginning. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I got,
Yeah.
When I was, 19 years old and got a summer job, as a nanny, I wasn't thinking, wow, this would be a great time to start, the nation's largest employer of babysitters, right now. I was thinking, I need to make, a little bit of, burrito money, if you want to call it that. I needed a summer job.
Yeah.
And then that turned into one thing, turned into another thing. And opportunities evolve and your thinking evolves. So I think having the ample amount of urgency, but giving oneself and a company and an idea time to evolve is really, really important, because anybody who says, wow, I had this idea, we started it in a garage or a dorm room or insert sort of locale, and then a few things happened and then we took it public, like that is just simply not the case. So if you're
Yeah.
feeling like, oh geez, everyone seems to have it figured out, they don't, and you're doing just fine. Keep at it.
How long, just out of curiosity, was it from when you started that company until it was acquired?
So the
Ballpark.
milestones would be: I started it in 2001. I graduated college in 2003. I started franchising the concept in 2005. Around 2010 or so, we started really implementing technology to enable the concept. And that's where, things really can start to scale. And that was a lesson I sort of learned the hard way, and informed what I went to do next. And then we were acquired by Bright Horizons in 2016. So it was a 15-year journey.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's one of those things, like, people might look at, when a company first kind of comes into the public eye to when it gets acquired or goes public or whatever, and they think of that's how old the company is. And almost every time I talk to a founder, there's like a good 5 or 6 years before that, at minimum, that they were working on it, like in their spare time, but a lot of times that they were working on it.
That's right. It's a classic 10-year overnight success.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of dive a little bit into how you went from that into what you're doing now.
Yeah, I took a sabbatical that was actually extended, but also helped to a certain extent by the pandemic. Helped in a way, not that it was and is a very terrible thing that our human race has experienced, but at the same time, for me personally, when everything shuts down, then it removes the sort of fear of missing out, of being relevant out in the business community. So what it did for me, it corresponded with a planned sabbatical to think about, what do I want to do next? And, having a successful exit is great. And, I hope it for anyone who has the opportunity to be a part of that on a leadership team or a team, et cetera. But it also leaves the sort of entrepreneur with okay, now what? And it's not only about sort of, how big is this exit or that exit? Do I have to work? Do I not have to work? I was 36 at the time. And it is, for me, we talk about life-work balance. And when most people talk about life-work balance, they're talking about the life part. I'm working too much. And that's very true. For me at the time, I was out of life-work balance as I didn't have enough meaningful work, actually, when I was on a break. So I got to take stock in, what do I really like to do? What are my unique abilities? What really created value in the experience? So I built a matrix in evaluating a wide variety of opportunities. I knew I wanted to be working with great people that knew more about an area than I knew about. I wanted to do what's particularly important to me personally, my why, which was to facilitate extraordinary. And my kids often ask who people do which people in my different companies do things, and they all do great things. This person leads technology and this person leads marketing. And one time it sort of caught me off guard because one of my children said, well, what do you do? I said, well, he goes, it doesn't sound like you do anything. And it's like, well, I help, facilitate extraordinary. And kind of, I think I got an eye roll and they walked away. But in any event, I built a list, and I wanted to be in a place of great potential. I wanted to help other entrepreneurs be better at what they're doing and what they're building. And I wanted to be in a massive industry. So, as things were, I had some friends that built a pretty remarkable vertical SaaS company called Sports Engine. Sports Engine was, again, one of those 15-year overnight successes. They provided the full stack for youth sports teams to do what they do, and they enable sports to be more people to participate, et cetera. But what they really are, from a business standpoint, is a embedded payments and fintech Trojan horse. They have built a massively valued business. Comcast, NBC acquired them using a strategy and technology and a team that enabled them to do more good things for youth sports and families and athletes. And when I really started understanding that embedded payments and fintech was their economic engine inside of Sports Engine, that was really intriguing to me because it was sort of hiding in plain sight. I had certainly some experience on some of the injustice that exists. In processing payments. At least we felt that all of our franchise locations. So they looked back on that experience and said, well, that was a good one in terms of the exit, but it was really complicated and very expensive. And maybe it shouldn't be that way. So we got together, and the founders of that company that have since moved on, the chief payments officer, the chief technology officer, and said, what if there's a different way? What if there's a way where even the smallest of platforms could take advantage of embedded payments or embedded finance to accelerate their potential, where it doesn't require them to process hundreds of millions before they actually get a fair rate. So, and it doesn't require them to have sort of some inside track before they can benefit from offering embedded lending. So that's what we went out to do. Unlike my first company, this was software from the beginning, venture capital from the beginning, where the other one took a winding road of my sort of graduate education, so to speak, of entrepreneurship, of self-funding through cash flow, putting the house on the line from bank notes, and starting as a staffing company and then embedding technology lately. So that really is the story of how I went from being a hockey playing nanny to now, leading a team of remarkably talented engineers and, payment experts to help other platforms win at embedded payments and finance.
So you said a couple of things in there that I want to drill down on. One is that kind of feeling that the payments is unfair, which I think plenty of people kind of innately have that feeling, but don't necessarily understand how there could be a better way. Maybe we can touch a little bit on what exactly you mean by that, and then also kind of what your ideas are around how that can and should be better.
I think, at a very, very high level, if we think about the cost to collect payments, we've been sort of lulled into sleep that 3% is what it costs. And it's just simply not true. There are a lot of hands in the cookie jar along the way. And the true cost of the payment is varied, and it's often much, much less than that. So we've built a number of different software that challenges the cost, that challenges, we want to make sure that it's the right cost. And do different parties who are adding value along the transaction need to be paid? Of course, as long as there's value being added and it's not exorbitant. So we think that a lot of times for platforms, this is a negotiation once volume is reached. So pricing is based on volume, not on actual price of the payment. And we don't think that's right. We think one should be charged what it actually costs, maybe with some modest markup, right, for if there's services being provided for and value being created. But it shouldn't be, how is it that a payment costs 50 basis points less if you do $300 million of payment volume at that level, but 50 basis or 70 or 100 basis points more if you process $10,000. To me, that doesn't seem, right. If it costs what it costs, and I understand the volume game, but we think that there should be a little bit more fairness in the price of payments for those creating, valuable ecosystems. So we really focus on helping vertical platforms that are building software for other entrepreneurs, other, industries to enable what they do better, whether that's, venue management or sports tech, like our experience in sports, or care tech, like College Nannies was. And so that those entrepreneurs can use the, opportunities that embedded payments and embedded finance is, and including the lion's share of the value to power more feature development, more customer acquisition, and in whatever they do. We think that embedded payments in fintech as a strategy to add value first to their customers should also be a material growth. It should be the fuel that helps them do what they're doing better and more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could also see how there's opportunities for some industries to pass those savings on to their customers as well, where high fees are typically just accepted as like, that's what it costs because that's what the payments cost.
I think by controlling or having a material say with a partner of one's payments strategy, I mean, there isn't a platform out there today that, doesn't allow their customers to accept payments. Like that's a pretty easy, that's why Stripe exists, developer focused API to collect payments.
Right.
But a platform is creating a valuable ecosystem, and they should be able to set price. They should be able to bring in other products and make a business decision. How much do we want to monetize these? And if they choose to pass more savings along to their customers as part of their pricing strategy and then have a higher SaaS fee or something like that, we just think that they should have the power to do that. They should have the power to do that before they even generate revenue. Whereas conventional wisdom in the payments world has been, it's been eliminated, reserved for the few. And just like a lot of other tools exist today that allow entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs and new businesses to get way further ahead. No one needs to open their own server farm anymore. You can spin up AWS or whatever it happens to be this afternoon. So why should you have to build all your own payment infrastructure and become a payment facilitator? So part of this is that technology has accelerated in such a way that it's giving startup entrepreneurs, new platforms, greater opportunities sooner than before. And that's what technology is supposed to do, right? So it's pretty exciting.
So at a high level, like where does JustiFi, play into this? Like what's that relationship look like with the platforms and SaaS companies that you're partnering with?
Yeah, so we work with companies in a couple different ways. We have our core platform, which is an API, hosted solutions. We become their processor and their platform fintech orchestration. So what does that mean? It allows them to go on a journey. We think that every platform has 5x the potential or more than what they're really doing. And so it's allowing them to activate payments in such a way that it gives them control to have a sub-account architecture and monetize payments in whatever way, just like we talked about they want. And then we think that's about half of the story. That's about half of the economic value. Great. Then we go out and we bring in an orchestration layer, multiple different parties, lending, issuing, insurance, to bring features and new products to their platform customers, but also allowing them to participate in the lion's share of revenue. Ultimately, what this does is it allows them to maybe not become a fintech company themselves, but leverage all of these fintech tools without having to build and worry about all that is that, but yet still participating in sort of world-class economics. So it is a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too a proposition. And we built what we wish we had when we had built our successful platforms and had those exits. So that's one way. It's our platform. And that is very bespoke for each customer. And then we have a platform that is powered by our virtual fintech team, where we're providing strategy and support and data intelligence on a couple of different products that range from talking once a quarter to talking multiple times a week to our team, because we think that sometimes having an API is just simply not enough. It's required. Mm-hmm. Having hosted solutions is required, but how do you actually make these business decisions? Like, should I, lower the price? And, should I offer my platform for free if I'm making money on payments and embedded fintech? Should I lower, these sort of business decisions, and what's really the opportunity? And so we are providing both the technology, but also the team to help every platform to achieve their sort of fintech greatness.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. That seems to be a trend in. I see this in a lot of different spaces, in the different B2B spaces where they're enabling other companies, where it's like not just the technology, where it's like, here's the technology, it's hands off. There's like very much a combination of like, here's the technology and also here's access to our expertise. So you don't have to hire a whole team just to like think about these things and understand it at an expert level.
There's not enough chief payments officers in the world to have every
Yeah.
platform who has these aspirations to have the team. And another Minneapolis St. Paul company, Arctic Wolf, does the same thing for security. They have a concierge security officer team. So
Yep.
having a CISO is expensive. Having a chief payments officer is expensive. So this goes back to you don't need to. There once was a time where we thought owning everything, building all your own tech and team is the answer. And sometimes investors and folks acquiring it are saying, actually, that's a liability because the total cost of ownership and what we're really looking for is outcomes. So let's just give you the answers to the test.
Yeah. Is there, well, first, let me ask one question because I know there's a couple international people in the audience and that will watch this. How does this and does JustiFi work with companies outside of the US now / will they in the future? How does that change?
Yes, and yes. It really is on a case by case basis, but we point to numerous. So we run an orchestration layer on both the payment side and the embedded finance side. So that means that we point to multiple acquirers who process globally. So, and we point to multiple partners through lending and card issuing. So we bring it all together so that platforms don't have to go out and buy point solutions and integrate and determine how they get to talk to each other and all of those sort of things. So yes is the answer. Now we have a roadmap like everyone else, and it's about so getting into the technical discovery and the nitty gritty. But I think that ultimately, if we even just sort of step back a little bit to your maybe question you posed just a little bit ago around how does this apply to my startup? I think that when is the right time to go down this fintech route? Is it a distraction? And I think that those are all very important, relevant questions. And at one point in history, it very much was a distraction. The conventional way of thinking, the historical way of going about this is you build a platform, you charge SaaS fees, you have good customer success, you get to $200, $300, $400, $500 million of funds flow, and then maybe you can go through the 12 to 18 month process of becoming PCI compliant and becoming a payment facilitator with a bank, and then you can start monetizing that payment. So sort of the reward at the end of the journey, and then you can, you're really a player. And that number has gotten to even like higher than $1 billion at this point because of the true cost of doing this. And then came along sort of like, PayFac as a service, like, there's some startups that are out there that are doing that, and, but ultimately Stripe Connect and saying, well, wait a minute, you can spin this up right away and maybe you can monetize it a little bit. But that's sort of a closed ecosystem. So in order to really achieve, the optimal state, we think one needs to have, really platform fintech orchestration, taking the whole wider picture. And if you're going to allow customers to collect payments, you might as well be achieving the best monetization possible. And what I think many folks get tripped up on is, well, it's so small. What is 100 basis points or 70 basis points matter? And on a small volumes. But it's about getting it set up as for scale, because when one does reach scale, every basis point is super, super meaningful. So I would say that if one is going out and choosing to, raise money or not raise money, but having not just a vision, but bringing that vision forward, you get a lot greater credit if you're actually doing it. So, and if one can capture some revenue by doing something you would do anyway, which was allow your customers to accept payments, even if you don't go to the other embedded finance for a little while, it's going to help. It's going to help your valuation. It's going to help just your actual cash flow. So, I would say, when should someone do it? Admitting in my my fintech bias, but it would be yesterday.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I think
Yeah.
you're right, because people are like, well, that's part of the plan, but we'll do it when we hit 100 million in revenue or 10 million in revenue, at minimum.
That's right. Everyone has a roadmap, but someday never comes, right? Like, there's always going to be customer facing reasons not to stop building a core feature that someone's looking for and go off and do, the fintech sort of skunk works project. And rarely does folks, it takes longer because they don't have the expertise. We're all good at our lane. So, embedded payments is a business upon itself. Embedded financial services is 2 or 3 businesses. Mm-hmm. So we have the philosophy that be world-class at what you do, and then partner with folks that are world-class at what they do. And then together, it's again, you go back to that, the AWS or Azure sort of models that, folks would sort of laugh to say, well, we're going to, as soon as we get to a certain size, then we're going to, build out our server farm. Like,
yeah,
it's a liability. It's just not what you do anymore. So I think it's really exciting because what was only sort of a pipe dream is now very much a reality for a startup. As much, we have customers that are pre-revenue today. We have customers that are over $1 billion of funds flow. And the opportunity is real for both of them.
Well, that's exciting. I think that, there's probably a lot of detailed stuff we could get into, but I think that we'll keep it high level for this conversation. And I appreciate you joining us, telling us your story, kind of what you're doing and how JustiFi can help tech startups. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I'm already, my wheels are spinning on people that I want to introduce to you. And if there's anything else that you want to leave the Startup Grind community with, this is your opportunity to do it. And also let us know kind of where people can, what's the most appropriate way for people to find out more about JustiFi and kind of see how that relates to their specific company.
Yeah, great. My pleasure. So thank you for having me, Craig. This has been a good chat. Linking my 2 entrepreneurial experiences that really, don't necessarily make sense on the surface that go together. But I think it's when I think about the startup community, the thing I would point to is that it's a journey, and just sort of let the journey sort of unfold in front of you. It's important and good to, I think, push, but it also takes a tremendous amount of, trust and patience. I started with a summer job with college nannies, and it turned into a, 200 franchise location in multiple countries. And I didn't have that figured out, at the beginning. So don't feel like you need to either. And then as we look at sort of fintech is a term that's thrown around, and it's like everyone's a fintech company, and you can feel like, well, geez, do I need to be one? It's like, you don't maybe need to be one, but I think that exploring how might you leverage the power of financial services or financial technology into what you're doing can be a journey. We think every platform, every business has a fintech opportunity. One may be greater than another, but it can be much more approachable. And how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. So that's what I would sort of leave you with, is to think about your fintech journey, your entrepreneurial journey. We're always happy to jump on at JustiFi and just sort of share our story and give some free advice. We're champions for entrepreneurship. So you can reach us at JustiFi, and that's fi.ai.
Thank you so much, Joe.